Hi there, my name is Asher. My screen name at current.com is Asher P. The P is for my last name, which I'm not going to say on the internet. When I was a little kid, I used to think I was a reincarnated Chinese person, which was especially weird because I was raised Catholic. I've moved around a lot, and as such, I've been exposed to a lot of the USA. I've lived in the farmlands of Pennsylvania, the city of Cleveland, the state of Maine, and the nation of Texas. I've lived in the real Las Vegas, where the carpenters, service workers, and retired old people live, in cookie-cutter subdivisions with concrete yards. I've spent time couch surfing with my friends in Bismarck, North Dakota. I've hung around in Phoenix and Prescott, Arizona. I lived in New Hampshire for a period of time. Couch surfed my way through Eugene and Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Olympia, and Aberdeen, Washington. It's for this reason when people ask me where I'm from, I say America. Current89 asks, do you have any favorite political leaders, past and or present? Number one would have to be Gandhi. He took down an empire without a single bullet being fired. After that, I would have to mention a number of luminaries from the civil rights movement here in the United States, most notably Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks. While they did work in electoral politics to an extent, they never did get bogged down in partisanship or compromising. To be fair, the entire political establishment was against them, so to them it wasn't really like the Democrats or Republicans were the lesser of two evils. Both parties in this instance were a number of times on the wrong side of history, and it took consistent pressure and criticism from the civil rights movement on both parties in order to get anything done. Gandhi and Malcolm X both pushed extensively for localization of economies, so that communities would be codependent on other members. Malcolm X and Gandhi both knew there was no point in waiting around for somebody in the government to do something for you, and that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. So if your kids needed education and your schools were crap, you taught your kids yourself, or you started your own school. If your kids needed clothes, you set up organizations where people could distribute hand-me-downs, or you got together and you made clothes. If you had no food because your main crops were plants that were used for dyes for the British textile industry, and the British didn't pay you enough for your crops for you to buy food, stop growing dye and grow your own food. It's up to us to make the change that we want to see happen in the world. And these people prove that. We really do have to be the change that we expect to see in the world. It's far too easy to blame things on systems, blame things on vast entities or social constructions like the media or the government, and then after delivering such criticism, sit back and do nothing. Next up, I'd like to give a shout out to Eugene V. Debs. This man ran for president for most of his adult life, and he ran on a socialist platform. It was because of his ability to threaten their access to power that the Democratic Party ended up adopting most of his platform into their platform, something else that's important to remember. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to Ralph Nader. Before he started running for president, he was a tremendous civil advocate and one of the most respected public lobbyists in the United States of America. He, through public interest organizations, is responsible for so much stuff that we take for granted today. Organizations he started, like PIRG, Public Citizen, etc., have successfully changed history, giving us the Freedom of Information Act, OSHA, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the EPA, seatbelts, airbags, safety standards for cars, nutrition labeling on food, and so much more. I really suggest everybody see the film An Unreasonable Man for more information on how Ralph Nader has directly impacted your daily life. How do you feel about the state of American political discourse? Would you change anything about it? Aside from a few folks like Dennis Kucinich, Bernie Sanders, and to a lesser extent Ron Paul, most political discourse is something like third graders having an insult contest. When pundits go after each other on the news, I imagine two 6-year-olds on the playground talking about whose dad can beat up whose dad. There's very little respect for facts or truth. A whole bunch of time and energy is wasted scoring political points, which for the politicians works well for getting reelected, but for the public doesn't do a whole lot to change anything. People with partisan blinders on certainly recognize that the other party is guilty of this, but often don't recognize that their own party is equally as guilty. In reality, both sides of the aisle are playing for the same corporate team, and they use the placing of blame on one party or the other to hide the fact that there's actually a much larger corporate agenda that's being pushed through. No matter who controls the majority, roughly the same agenda is pushed through, with some minor differences in social policy. And the reasoning for why they push this pro-corporate Wall Street agenda through will differ depending on who's in power. So while it is for different reasons and different talking points, it is the same agenda. Funnel tax dollars to the mega rich while doing the absolute bare minimum necessary in order to get reelected by your constituency.